And Shalom Israel. Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shah Barakatham to the brothers watching. Yahweh Shemal Tham Bashim Yahweh Shah to the sisters watching. This is ISUPK, started out at 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commander General Yohana. We teach that so-called blacks, Hispanics, and North American Indians are descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel. The biblical ethnic Israelites according to the Bible. This is Priest and Officer Howard Moore, ISUPK, Kentucky. And this is our Wednesday night law class. What we finna get into tonight, I know that we recently had so-called Memorial Day, right? So we finna get into that. So the topic is the GI Bill, Memorial Day, and Trump. All right, the GI Bill, Memorial Day, and Trump, and how all these things tie in together. So we got an article for you. We're finna get into. It's from the History Channel on how the GI Bill was denied to 1 million Black World War II veterans. Now, what you got to understand about the post-war era? The post-war era is what made America the richest, most powerful nation on the planet. All right, it was the post-World War II era that made America the richest, most powerful nation on the planet. When you get the idea of the American dream, when you get the idea of the big house, right, with the white fence, the 2 kids and a dog, right? This whole concept comes from this time period right here, at an era where America became the richest, most powerful nation on the planet. The GI Bill was denied to 1 million Black veterans. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Let's go ahead and get into the article. Again, this is from the History Channel. How the GI Bill's promise was denied to 1 million Black veterans. The sweeping bill promised prosperity to veterans, so why didn't Black Americans benefit? Again, this is a period in time, the post-war era, where America became the richest, most powerful nation on the planet. Again, the post-war era, post-World War II, is when America became the richest, most powerful nation on the planet. Yet, Black Americans did not benefit from the GI Bill or its benefits. All right, Eugene Burnett saw the neat tract houses of Leventon, New York. He knew he wanted to buy one. It was 1949, and he was ready to settle down in a larger home with his family. The newly established Long Island suburb seemed like the perfect fit, the perfect place to begin the post-war life, one that he hoped would be improved with the help of the GI Bill, a piece of sweeping legislation aimed at helping World War II veterans like Burnett prosper after the war. So again, post-World War II is when America became the richest, most powerful nation on the planet Earth. This is where we get the concept of the big house, the big yard, the white fence, the 2 kids and a dog, right? This is this whole time period right here. All right. But when he spoke to a salesman about buying the house using the GI Bill guaranteed mortgage, the door to suburban life in Leventon slammed firmly in his face. The suburb wasn't open to Black residents. So, in a time where America prospered the most, in a time where Americans prospered the most, all right, this prosperity was not open to Black Americans. All right. This prosperity that America went through after World War II was not open to Black Americans. It was, though it wasn't real, Burnett's wife Bernice recalled. Look at the house. Can you imagine having this? And then for them to tell me because of the color of my skin, I can't be a part of it. The Burnetts weren't the only Black Americans for whom the promise of the GI Bill turned out to be an illusion. Through the bill help white Americans prosper, and accumulate wealth in post-war years, it didn't deliver on that promise for veterans of color. Again, it says the bill helped white Americans prosper and accumulate wealth in post-war years. Again, this was the time period that America became the richest, most powerful nation on the planet Earth. In fact, wide disparity in the bill's implementation ended up helping drive growing gaps in wealth, education, and civil rights between white and black Americans. This is when the wealth gap between blacks and whites started to grow. All right, and there was a poll just came out recently that the racial wealth gap between whites and blacks is right now exactly where it was in 1950. All right, from 1950 to 2024, the racial wage gap has not moved from white Americans to black Americans. All right, while the GI Bill's language did not specifically exclude African American veterans from its benefits, it was structured in a way that ultimately shut the door for 1.2 million black veterans who bravely served their country during World War II in segregated ranks. Okay, look here. Blacks, Hispanics, and North American Indians have fought and died in every war since the existence of this place. All right, Blacks, Hispanics, and American Indians have fought and died in every war from the beginning, all the way back to the Revolutionary War, and we finna get into that too. All right, it says when lawmakers began drafting the GI Bill in 1944, some Southern Democrats feared that returning black veterans would use public sympathy for veterans to advocate against Jim Crow. To make sure the GI Bill largely benefited white people, Southern Democrats drew on tactics they had previously used to ensure that the New Deal helped few black people as possible. During the drafting of the law, the chair of the House Veteran Committee, Mississippi Congressman John Rankin, played hardball and instead that the program be administered by individual states instead of the federal government. Rankin was known for his virulent racism. He defended segregation, opposed interracial marriage, and even proposed legislation to confine, then deport every person with Japanese heritage during World War II. When the bill came to a committee vote, he stonewalled in an attempt to gut another provision that entitled veterans to $20 a week of unemployment compensation for a year. Rankin knew this would represent a significant gain for black Southerners, so he refused to cast the critical proxy vote in protest. The American Legion ended up tracking down the congressman who had left his proxy vote with Rankin and flying him to Washington to break the deadline. So basically what it's getting into is the fear that Southern Democrats had of black success, right? More specifically, the black success that was going on during the era of Reconstruction. All right. During the era of Reconstruction is when you started to see black millionaires, black business owners, black mayors, black politicians. And this was immediately after the Emancipation Proclamation. All right. So you had Southern Democrats with a fear of the success of the black community. All right. And again, this was a fear of what already happened during the era of Reconstruction. All right. From the start, black veterans had trouble securing the GI Bill's benefits. Some could not access benefits because they had not been given an honorable discharge. And a much larger number of black veterans were discharged dishonorably than their white counterparts. Veterans who did not qualify could not find facilities that delivered on the promise. Black veterans in vocational training program at a segregated high school in Indianapolis were unable to participate in activities related to plumbing, electricity, and printing because of adequate equipment was only available to white students. Intimidation kept others from enjoying the GI Bill benefits. In 1947, a crowd hurled rocks at black veterans as they moved into a Chicago housing development. Thousands of black veterans were attacked in the years following World War II, and some were singled out and lynched. Again, this is an era, I'll say it again, the post-World War II era was an era of American prosperity, and the post-World War II era is when America became the wealthiest, most powerful nation on the planet. All right, the most wealthy, powerful the wealthiest, most powerful nation on the planet. And again, over 1 million black veterans were denied the GI Bill. All right, this is an animal. This is a cruel animal that rules over us. Again, this was an era where you get the idea of the American dream. This is the era where you get the idea of the big house in the suburbs, the white fence, the 2 kids and the dog. All right, this was that time period of American prosperity that was denied to black veterans. All right, it says black veterans. It says black veterans and civil rights groups protested their treatment, calling for protections like black involvement in the VA and non-discriminatory loans, but the racial disparities in the implementation of the GI Bill had already been set in motion. As the years went on, white veterans flowed into newly created suburbs where they began amassing wealth in skilled positions. But black veterans lacked those options. The majority of skilled jobs were given to white workers. The post-war housing boom almost entirely excluded black Americans, most of whom remained in cities that received less and less investment from businesses and banks. All right. If you ever wondered why black and Hispanic neighborhoods look the way they do, and have you ever wondered why white suburbs look the way they do? See, we've always been taught because we were lazy, right? Because we were ignorant, or because we weren't strong enough to pull ourselves up from our own bootstraps, right? But this is the reason for our neighborhoods being the way they are and their neighborhoods being the way they are. It says the GI Bill granted low interest mortgages and other loans. They were not administered by the VA itself. Thus, the VA could co-sign but not actually guarantee the loans. This gave white-run financial institutions free rein to refuse mortgages and loans to black people. Redlining, a decades-old practice of marking maps by race to characterize the risk of lending money and providing insurance, made purchasing a home even more difficult for black veterans. Lenders froze out poor neighborhoods, ensuring that loan assistance and insurance would be denied. And new white suburbs often came with overly racist covenants that denied entry to black people. So, because of the history of redlining that forced our communities into poorer, more lower income neighborhoods, and it restricted newer suburbs to whites only. It says in 1947, only 2 of the more than 3,200 VA guaranteed home loans, 13 in Mississippi, went to black borrowers. These implements were not confined to the South. In New York and the southern New Jersey suburbs, fewer than 100 of the 67,000 mortgages insured by the GI Bill supported homes purchases by non-whites. So there goes your myth. There goes your myth that the southern whites are the bad ones and the northern whites are the good ones. All right. There goes the myth that the southern whites are the bad ones and the northern whites are the good ones. All right. Look, a devil is a devil is a devil is a devil. I don't care if he's from Mississippi or from New Jersey. All right. A devil is a devil, whether he's from Alabama or he's from Pennsylvania. All right. It says 1947, only 2 of the 3,200 VA guarantee home loans in Mississippi went to black borrowers. These implements were not confined to the South. In New York and northern New Jersey suburbs, fewer than 100 of the 67,000 mortgages insured by the GI Bill supported home purchases by non-whites. Black veterans in search of the education they had been guaranteed fared no better. Many black men returning home from the war didn't even try to take advantage of the bill's educational benefits. They could not afford to spend time in school instead of working. But those who did were at a considerable disadvantage compared to their white counterparts. Public education provided poor preparation for black students, and many lacked much educational attainment at all due to poverty and social pressure. As veteran applications flooded universities, black students found themselves left out. So, black veterans were left out of education, home loans, and jobs after World War II. All right, in an era where, I'll say it again, America became the wealthiest, most powerful nation on the planet post-World War II, 1.2 million black veterans were denied GI Bill benefits. Again, this included education, jobs, and home loans. All right, this is what caused the wealth gap in the first place. This is what caused the racial wealth gap in the first place. And again, the racial wealth gap hasn't moved since 1950. The racial wealth gap between whites and blacks is just as large now as it was in 1950. All right, it says the original GI Bill ended in July 1956. By that time, nearly 8 million World War II veterans had received education and training, and 4.3 million home loans worth $33 billion had been handed out. But most black veterans had been left behind. As employment, college attendance, and wealth surged for blacks, disparities with their black counterparts not only continued, but widened. No greater instrument for widening the already huge racial gap in post-war America than the GI Bill. Today, the stark wealth gap between white and black Americans persists. The median income for white households is $76,057. According to U.S. Census, for black households, it was $46,073. All right, so it said no greater instrument for the widening of the racial wealth gap in post-war America was the GI Bill. All right, this is a wicked animal that rules over us. All right, so let's go into the history of how so-called blacks, Hispanics, and North American Indians fought and died in every single war since the beginning of this place. All right, you thought it was just World War II. You thought it was just World War II. You thought it was just this era where we've been discriminated against. Well, let me show you something real quick. All right, watch this. Got some slides for y'all. So like. All right, so like this might be a little hard to see. But this is all the way back during the American Revolution when the United States gained their independence from the British. All right, so it's got on one side the United States and their allies. On the other side, it's got the British and their allies. All right, if you go down, if you scroll down to the bottom, it'll show the combatants, and it'll show all of the Native American Indians that fought on the side of the colonists and fought on the side of the British. All right, so on the colonist side, you had the Oneida, Tuscarora, Tacaba, Lenape, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Mohican, Micmac, Abenaki, Cherokee, Pee and Lumbee. All right, all of these Indian tribes fought on the side of the colonists. And on the British, you had the Odaga, Mohawk, Cayuga, Seneca, Micmac, Cherokee, Ottawa, Muskogee, Shinnecock, and the Shawnee. All right. Now, the reason that you had Indians fighting on both sides of the war is because the colonists used the already Indians that were already in conflict with each other. They used Indians that were already in conflict with each other to pit against each other. All right, and that's how the colonizer got certain Indians to fight on his side. Now the British, on the other hand, the British had a group of Indians called the Loyalists, and the British, they never really intended on staying in the first place. All right, the British never really intended on staying in the first place. They just wanted to get into the tobacco trade with the American Indians. So because the British promised to leave if they won the war, that's why you had so many Indians on the side of the British. Salakia. All right, so one of these Indians was Crispus Attucks. All right, people know him as the first person to die in the Revolutionary War. All right, Crispus Attucks was the first person to die in the Revolutionary War. Now let's talk about him real quick. All right, this is from the American Historical Record. American Historical Record. All right, American Historical Record, 1872. All right, it says, who was Crispus Attucks? By the testimony of the witnesses given at the trial in November 1770, he is called the mulatto. I believe grave doubts can be thrown on this assumption, and that the weight of carefully examined testimony will prove that he was a Massachusetts Indian. All right, Crispus Attucks, the first person to die in the Revolutionary War, was a Massachusetts Indian. Again, so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and North American Indians have fought and died in every single war since the beginning of this place. All right, so Crispus Attucks, Massachusetts Indian. And like I said, there were a group of Indians that were known as the Loyalists. And these were the Indians that fought on the side of the British because the British had promised to leave if they won the war. And they only wanted to be involved in the tobacco trade. So this is how Indians called the Loyalists. A group of Indians called the Loyalists fought on the side of the British. All right, the Chickamauga Wars were a series of battles, ambushes, and massacres staged by white Scottish-Irish militias and settlers against the Indians who were under Chief Dragon Canoe in Kentucky, the Carolinas, Tennessee, and Georgia during and after the American Revolutionary War. All right, this is Chief Dragon Canoe. All right, Chief Dragon Canoe was called the Savage Napoleon by white settlers. Now you see how evil our oppressor is. All right, this man right here, all right, Chief Dragon Canoe was called the Savage Napoleon. All right, our oppressor is an animal. Our oppressor is an animal. So again, the Chickamauga Wars were a series of battles, ambushes, and massacres staged by white Scottish-Irish militias and settlers against Indians who were under Chief Dragon Canoe in Kentucky, the Carolinas, Tennessee, and Georgia during and after the Revolutionary War. All right, the Battle of Fort Dearborn. All right, August 15, 1812. Now I saw this when we were down in Chicago during Memorial Day weekend to check out Commander General Yohana live at the Roundtable of Truth podcast. And I saw this downtown Chicago. All right, this is an image of the Battle of Fort Dearborn. All right, one of the wars of 1812, or one of the battles during the War of 1812, took place where downtown Chicago is today. All right, one of the battles during the War of 1812 took place where downtown Chicago is today. All right, Battle of Fort Dearborn was a battle between United States troops and Potawatomi Indians that occurred in present-day Chicago. The battle was part of the War of 1812. It lasted about 15 minutes and resulted in a complete victory for the Potawatomi Indians. So, Potawatomi Indians, right, during this battle, put their foot in the white man's ass. All right, so like it. After the battle, the federal government became convinced that all Indians had to be removed from the territory. So this was the beginning. This was the beginning of Indian removal. And Indian removal didn't just take place in the Southeast, but Indian removal took place all over. All right, and again, this image right here is actually downtown Chicago right now. And it's right by Trump Towers. All right, it's right by Trump Towers. So that devil, Donald Trump, the man that was just found guilty of 34 felonies and will likely not do any jail time at all. And I wouldn't be surprised if they figure out some loophole to make this devil president again. But Trump Towers is built on the place of the Battle of Fort Dearborn. Okay, again, this was one of the battles of the War of 1812. Right, this image is right here. All right, right by Trump Towers. And Trump Towers was built at the location of this famous battle. And it's the location where they decided that the Potawatomi Indians had to be removed from Illinois territory. All right, this location is all about the removal of the North American Indian. This location is all about the removal of the Potawatomi Indians. And this location was picked to be the location for Trump Towers. All right, Chief John Gear. All right, Chief John Gear. All right, during the War of 1812, this Choctaw chief and his warriors joined U.S. forces under the command of Andrew Jackson to defeat the British at the Battle of New Orleans. All right, so this was an Indian chief that thought it would be best to join forces with the Americans against the British. All right, so during the War of 1812, this Choctaw chief and his warriors joined U.S. forces under the command of General Andrew Jackson to defeat the British at the Battle of New Orleans. So it was because of this Choctaw chief and his warriors, again, so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and North American Indians fought and died in every single war that this country has been in. All right, it's because of this Choctaw chief and his soldiers that Andrew Jackson defeated the British at the Battle of New Orleans. So it's because of an Indian that Andrew Jackson defeated the British at the Battle of New Orleans. But then turn around, here's a quote from Andrew Jackson. Those tribes cannot exist surrounded by our settlements and in continual contact with our citizens certain. They have neither the intelligence, the industry, the moral habits, nor the desire of improvement, which are essential to any favorable change of their condition. Again, right after this Indian chief with his soldiers helped Andrew Jackson defeat the British in the Battle of New Orleans, now all of a sudden, we lack the intelligence, we lack the industry, we lack the morality, and the desire for improvement. All right, this is an animal. This is a cruel animal that rules over us. All right, and I'm sure everybody's heard about the Trail of Tears. I'm sure everybody's heard about the Trail of Tears. What about the Trail of Death? The Trail of Death was a march from Potawatomi territory in Indiana and Illinois, and these Potawatomi Indians were marched in single file lines all the way to Kansas. All right, after having marched single file for 660 miles, the Potawatomi were placed under the supervision of the local Indian agent and Reverend Christian Hoken. Of the 859 who began the journey, 756 survived, 42 were recorded as having died, and the remainder escaped. This was a death march from the homeland of the Potawatomis all the way down to reservations in Kansas. And it said 42 were recorded as having died. And again, these people were marched single file from Illinois all the way to Kansas. All right. But all of this started, the removal of the Potawatomi started after the Battle of Fort Dearborn, again, which was a total victory for the Potawatomi. It says the battle lasted about 15 minutes. This is an image of it. And this image is downtown Chicago right here, right next to Trump Towers. And it marks the place of the battle. And it also marks the place of where our oppressor gets the idea for Indian removal. And we have the completion of that Indian removal with the Potawatomi Trail of Death, September to November 1838. All right, the Civil War. Right, we had a Cherokee that fought on the side of the Confederacy during the Civil War. Here's your Cherokee soldiers. All right, another Confederate. He was said to be the bodyguard for General Robert E. Lee. And you had blacks that fought on both sides of this conflict also. All right, Union and Confederate soldiers. If I may, there's a good book on the topic called Black Confederates. All right, there's a great book on the topic called Black Confederates. All right, so blacks and Hispanics fought on both sides of the conflict during the Civil War. All right, World War I, the original code talkers, Oklahoma Historical Society. All right, when U.S. military codes kept being broken by the Germans during World War I, a Native American tribe came to the rescue. And they just spoke their own language, which baffled the enemy and paved the way for other Native American code talkers in World War II. All right, during World War I, the U.S. military code was broken by the Germans, and Native Indians came to the rescue. All right, if it wasn't for Native American code talkers, all right, the U.S. military codes were already broken by the Germans. All right, Native American Indians are responsible for the Allied victory during World War I. All right, North American Indians were responsible for the Allied victory in World War I. All right, again, when U.S. military codes kept being broken by the Germans, a Native American tribe came to the rescue. All right. The Allies won World War I with the aid of North American Indians. All right, it's an irony that probably didn't go unnoticed by Choctaw soldiers fighting in World War I, while the tribe's children were being whipped for speaking their own native tongue at schools in Oklahoma. On the battlefields of France, the Native American language was the much-needed answer to a very big problem. So it was the Native Indian language that helped the Allies win World War I. But children in these boarding schools were having their backs whipped for speaking their own language. Now make that make sense. It was because of the Native Indian languages that helped the Allies win World War I. At the same time, in these boarding schools, children's backs were being beat for speaking their own languages in Oklahoma. All right, the white man is the devil that the Bible speaks of. All right, the remains of 5 Native American children who died at indigenous schools are being returned to their tribes over a century later. Officials have identified 53 schools, 53 of these Indian boarding schools that had marked or unmarked burial sites containing the remains of children who died at schools, often far from home. The agency documented 500 deaths in 19 of these boarding schools. 500 deaths in 19 of these boarding schools. Again, at the same time that Native Indian soldiers are helping the Allies win this war, at the same time Native Indians are helping the Allies win World War I, this is happening to their children back home. This is happening to their children back home. All right, fuck Memorial Day. All right, Native Indians won World War I. And while this is happening, this is what's happening to their children back at these Indian boarding schools. 500 deaths in 19 schools. All right, Tuskegee Airmen. Tuskegee Airmen. All right, renowned for their squadron's achievements, the Tuskegee Airmen flew more than 15,000 over North Africa and Europe during World War II, and destroyed more than 250 enemy aircraft on the ground and 150 in the air. The squadron never lost a bomber to enemy aircraft fire during their mission escorts. All right, the Tuskegee Airmen never lost a bomber. And these men, these are the men that were denied the GI Bill. These were the men that were denied home loans. These are the men that were denied education. These were the men that were denied jobs and faced lynch mobs after World War II. And again, the post-World War II era is the era that made America the richest and most powerful nation on the planet. And it was because of the GI Bill that created the racial wealth gap that we still have today in 2024. And these were the men that helped win World War II. And there's still a war going on today. It's still a war going on today. Don't think it's not. It's still a war going on today. This is the gravesite of Fred Hampton. All right, the gravestone of assassinated Black Panther leader Fred Hampton, riddled with bullet holes According to Fred Hampton's son, the gravesite is regularly defaced and shot up, allegedly by law enforcement officers. All right, the gravestone of assassinated Black Panther leader Fred Hampton. According to his son, his headstone is regularly shot up by the police department. All right, the gravesite of Fred Hampton is regularly defaced and shot up by the police department. But Angela Davis, though, she seems to be doing just fine these days. Could it be because her paternal lineage comes from the Mayflower? Could it be? Could it be because her lineage comes from the Mayflower? Or because she's a part of the LGBT community? Since it is so-called Pride Month, all right, Angela Davis seems to be getting along just fine these days. Could it be that her paternal lineage comes from the Mayflower? Or again, since it's so-called Pride Month, could it be that it's because she is of the LGBT community? Here's a so-called life partner right here. All right, Angela Davis is a part of the LGBT community, and she's getting along just fine. But Fred Hampton, according to his son, his gravesite is regularly shot up by the police department. All right, let's get into the Bible. Let's get into the Bible. All right, we're going to start with the book of Judges, chapter 3, verse 1. Now these are the nations which the Lord left to prove Israel by them, even as many of Israel as had not known all the wars of Canaan. All right. The nations were left around us so that we might learn war. All right. The nations were not left around us for us to integrate into. The nations weren't left around us for us to learn their customs, learn their traditions, right? Learn their gods. All right. The other nations were left around us to show us war. All right. We were never meant to be integrated into their societies. We were never meant to be integrated into their societies. Again, these nations were left round about us, not to learn integration, but to learn war. All right, let's drop that. All right, the book of Judges, chapter 3, verse 2. Oh, that the generations of Israel might know to teach them war, at the least such as before knew nothing thereof. All right, again, the Bible is saying that these other nations were left around us that we would know war. All right, that we would learn war. Not integration, all right, but to learn war. All right, let's drop that. Let's go to the book of Isaiah chapter 13, verse 15. Book of Isaiah chapter 13, verse 15. Everyone that is found shall be thrust through, and everyone that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. All right. This is teaching against integration right now. All right. Everyone that is joined unto them will fall by the sword. All right. When Christ returns, every one of us that is joined to this place, spiritually joined to this place, mentally joined to this place, is going to fall by the sword. All right. Anybody that's holding hands with a white girl, anybody that's wearing the the red, white, and blue short set and cooking ribs on Memorial Day is going to fall by the sword. All right. Anybody that's voting for Donald Trump or Joe Biden is going to fall by the sword. Because again, these nations were left around us not to learn integration, but to learn war. And again, it's still a war going on today. That's why Fred Hampton's gravestone is being shot up, allegedly, by law enforcement officers. All right, next scripture. The book of Numbers, chapter 1, verse 18. And they assembled all the congregation together on the day of the second month, and they declared their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names from 20 years old and upwards by the polls. So what the Bible's saying here is that you are the seed of your father. All right. You are who your father is. All right. So being an Israelite doesn't have as much to do with skin color and hair texture as it does who your father is. So if you're so-called Black, Hispanic, or North American Indian, all right, of so-called Black or indigenous descent on your father's side, you're an Israelite. All right. So you are who your father is. That's why I asked the question, is Angela Davis leading a good life today? Is it because she's LGBT? Or is it because her father's lineage comes from the Mayflower? Is it because she's LGBT? Or is it because her father's lineage comes from the Mayflower? All right. So let's drop that. Let's go to the next scripture. Let's go to the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 10, verse 7. Ecclesiastes 10, verse 7. I have seen servants upon horses and princes walking as servants upon the earth. All right. I have seen servants upon horses and princes walking as servants upon the earth. We talked earlier about the Trail of Death, where the Potawatomi Indians were marched in single file lines, all right, from September to November 1838, when the Potawatomi Indians were marched from their homeland all the way to reservations in Kansas. And during this death march, 42 Indians died. So these servants on horses is our oppressor. All right. Our oppressor is the real servant. Our oppressor is the real slave. It says, I have seen servants upon horses and princes walking as servants upon the earth. These princes, right, these Israelites from the biblical tribe of Gad, the Potawatomi Indians, were marched like servants upon the earth from their homelands in Illinois all the way to reservations in Kansas. All right, let's drop that. Let's go to the book of Ezekiel. Let's go to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 35, verse 1. Moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, verse 2, Son of man, set thy face against Mount Seir and prophesy against it. Now, Mount Seir, when it's talking about Mount Seir, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for Esau. All right, it's a metaphor for Esau, the so-called white race, our oppressor in the earth. All right, it says, Son of man, set thy face against Mount Seir and prophesy against it. Verse 3. And say unto it, thus saith the Lord God, behold, O Mount Seir, I am against thee, and I will stretch out mine hand against thee, and I will make thee most desolate. So this is a prophecy. This is a prophecy concerning our enemy, our 400-year open enemy, all right, our oppressor, the so-called white man, the devil that the Bible speaks of. This is a prophecy against him. It says, I am against thee, and I will stretch out mine hand against thee, and I will make thee most desolate. Verse 4. I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate, and thou shalt know that I am the Lord. All right, Ezekiel 35:4. I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate, and thou shalt know that I am the Lord. All right, so for everything these people have done to us, all right, they're going to get theirs in the end. All right, the Lord said, I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate, and thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Verse 5. Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by force of the sword in the time of their calamity, and in the time that their iniquity had an end. All right, our enemy, our oppressor, has had a perpetual hatred and shed the blood of the children of Israel by force. We already read about all of those deaths in these Indian boarding schools. And these children were buried in unmarked graves. All right, about how their backs were beaten for speaking their own language. At the same time, that language was actually winning World War I. After the Germans broke the U.S. code, these Indians just speaking their own language helped win World War I. And again, at the same time, their children were being killed. Their children were dying. Their children were dying in these boarding schools. All right. Our enemy has had a perpetual hatred and has shed the blood of the children of Israel by force of the sword in the time of their calamity and the time of their iniquity and had an end. All right, let's drop that. And let's go to the book of 2nd Ezra, chapter 6, verse 57. 2nd Ezra 6 and 57. And now, O Lord, behold, these heathen, which have ever been reputed as nothing, have begun to be lords over us and devour us. All right, so when it's talking about the heathen, it's talking about anybody who is not so-called Black, Hispanic, or North American Indian. All right, it's talking about anybody who is not of our race, anybody not of our family. All right, the so-called white race, the so-called African, the so-called Chinese, Japanese, Arab, etc. All right, it says, and now, O Lord, behold, these heathen, which have ever been reputed as nothing, have begun to be lords over us and devour us. All right, the people who are nothing have become lords over us. Well, who is it talking about? All right, who is it talking about? These people who are nothing. All right, y'all. These people are arguing over if a boy can be a girl, or if a girl can be a boy. These are the people that are ruling over us. The people that don't even know how to wash and cook their food properly. These are the people that are ruling over us. All right, these people that don't even know how to wash up properly. These people are ruling over us. All right. These heathens, which have been reputed as nothing, have begun to be lords over us and devour us. All right, verse 58. But we, thy people, whom thou hast called thy firstborn, thy only begotten, and thy fervent lover are given into their hands. All right, so thy people, it's talking about the chosen people of God. All right, Blacks, Hispanics, and North American Indians. We are the people We're the Lord's firstborn. We're the Lord's only begotten. And we're the ones that are being given over into the hands of our enemies. All right, given over into the hands of our enemies to help them win every war that they've been involved in. All right, help them win the Revolutionary War, help them win the War of 1812, help them win the Civil War, World War I, World War II, only to be denied GI Bill benefits after coming home from World War II. We're being given over into their hands. All right, verse 59. If the world now be made for our sakes, why do we not possess an inheritance with the world? How long shall this endure? All right, so the Bible says the world was made for our sake. Why do we not possess an inheritance with the world? How long shall this endure? Well, we already read that post-World War II, because of the GI Bill benefits in home loans, education, and jobs, all right, this created an economy that made America the richest and most powerful nation on the planet Earth. And all of these benefits were being denied to Black veterans coming home after World War II. And this single incident is what created the racial wealth gap that we still have in 2024. The racial wealth gap is exactly where it was in 1950 as it is today. Even with all the degrees, all the education, all right, all of the so-called businessmen, all the so-called boss bitches that we have, all right, the racial wealth gap is exactly where it was in 1950. And again, it was because of all of the programs in education, home loans, and jobs that were given by the GI Bill that created this racial wealth gap that we have today. All right, the Bible says, why do we not possess an inheritance in this world, and how long shall this endure? All right, let's drop that. Let's go to the book of Revelation. Let's go to the book of Revelation, chapter 20 and verse 3. And cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. So when it's talking about the bottomless pit and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, we're talking about, the Bible calls 1,000 years, which is just a long span of time, where the lies and the deception of our enemy, of our oppressor, is not taking place in the earth. All right, we're talking about an era of 1,000 years where you had so-called Black, Hispanic, and North American empires all over the planet Earth. All right, all across the Americas, all over Europe, all over Russia, right, for 1,000 years. And after that, he must be loosed a little season. All right, and our oppressor was loosed a little season. All right, he was let loose a little season. And now his lies about us are being allowed to be spread throughout the earth. All right. The lie that Andrew Jackson told after an Indian helped him win against the British during the wars of 1812, it said that we didn't have the intelligence or the morality or the ingenuity to better ourselves. All right. And that's why Andrew Jackson pushed for Indian removal. All right. The lies of our oppressor is going to be allowed to be loosed again for a little season. All right. So let's drop that. Let's go to the book of Micah, chapter 2, verse 10. The book of Micah, chapter 2, verse 10. Arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest. Because it is polluted, it shall destroy you, even with the sword of destruction. All right. This place is not our rest. All right. The Bible says arise and depart. Now, it's not saying physically leave America and go to, I don't know, Egypt or some shit. All right. It's talking about spiritually and morally and mentally taking yourself out of this place. All right, this place is polluted. All right, this place is polluted. We just had Donald Trump. We just had Donald Trump be found guilty on 34 felony charges, and he's not going to do any jail time. And again, I said earlier that I wouldn't be surprised if they find a loophole to allow him to run for president again. All right. America was founded by criminals. It only makes sense that their president should be a criminal. All right. This place is polluted, and this place shall destroy us with the sword of destruction. And that's all that we've been going through since we've been in this place. Since we've been under the foot of our oppressor, we've been nothing but destroyed with the sword of destruction. All right, drop that last scripture. Last scripture, the book of Revelation, chapter 18, verse 2. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. All right, so this place is going to fall. All right, this place is going to fall, just like Egypt fell. All right, just like every other great empire falls, this place is going to fall too. And just like we read earlier, when this place does fall, anybody caught wrapped up in this place? Anybody, like I said, caught up in the philosophies of this place? Anybody caught up in the philosophy of voting? Anybody caught up in the philosophy of Christmas and integration and Thanksgiving and any of the other philosophies of this place, the LGBT community? All right, anybody that is caught up in this place is going to have to go with it. All right, anybody caught up in this place is going to have to go with it. All right, because this has become the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and end it. Shalom. Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai Barakatham. Yahweh Shemal Tham B'Shem Yahweh Shai. All right, be sure to tune in all week. ISUPK Kentucky, Monday night. History class taught by Officer of 1,000, ISUPK. Tuesday, Brotherhood class taught by Officer of 1,000, I'm a Wongabar. Wednesday, law class. Wednesday night, 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Crowd Spin Out podcast hosted by Officers of 1,000. I'm a Wongabar and ISUPK, and every other Sunday, which you only learn in history class. With that, we'll go ahead and end it. Shalom. Class dismissed.